it's me again. Today is very cold. It's like 33 degrees out. I gotta go, I guess, water sheep after I do this. But before I begin editing this, I gotta water horses, my sheep. The birds I did this morning, they're okay. I'll do them again this afternoon. But I gotta go water animals. It sucks because everything freezes. All my faucets freeze. As a result, you have to manually fill up the trough. You have to go to a spigot that's not frozen, fill it up, fill up the trough. And then you have a bucket system where one's filling up and you go fill up the other ones. You go take it over there and fill it up. That can take a few days to thaw out. It hasn't been warm enough for anything to thaw out yet. And things have been frozen since Tuesday night. So it's been a while for Texas. It was supposed to be in the high 40s. It's not today. It's, we're lucky to hit 35. Every day they say it's going to be one temperature and it winds up being cold. So I was going to do history of oil shale part 2 in Texas and talk about I guess the timeline of when they were drilling in Eagle Ford, which, is more of a really recent discovery in Texas. It's a very young shale, although it's very deep. Eagle Ford goes down 9,000 to 12,000 feet, in some cases 13,000, but it's a young shale from the Cretaceous. It's very interesting because it's so, but it's from the, I would say, mid-Cretaceous, anywhere from 95 to 75 million years ago. I guess that would put you sort of at the late Cretaceous era, but so yeah, it's when there was a sea here. There's a lot of history where there was a sea, there wasn't a sea, there was a sea, there wasn't a sea, depending where you were. There's either big dinosaur footprints where I am, or it was a sea. Yeah. It's a lot of ebb and flow of the sea, a lot of hot and cold, and that's what causes the oil and gas that we know today. But the Eagle Ford, I was going to talk about that and how that really didn't come into play until 2008. Again, that was after Shale Revolution. Eagle Ford came into play. History of my friend's property, who he has a few wells that are owned by Marathon on his property. And that's a big contingent for Marathon is the Eagle Ford. But there's a lot of buzz about MMTLP and about earnings for metamaterials, and maybe they'll announce something for MMTLP then, around earnings or shortly thereafter. I'm going to say let's wait on that, personally, because they might just focus on the earnings and Q&A for metamaterials and not announce anything for the dividend until maybe the end of March. So give it to the end of March. They said sometime in March to be completed by March, the Spinout. That gives us my topic today. We're going to talk about clues. I'm going to benchmark what we have gone over to a traditional Spinout, because I get asked this question a lot. And I thought it would be worth a little bit of a break on the history of drilling for salt in Texas and how that led to the drilling for oil in Texas. Drilling for oil first started with salt, believe it or not. Not everywhere had reliable access or infrastructure to go to the ocean to get salt. And if you're a pioneer in the middle of a desert, you need some salt for food to keep food. Salt was the preservative for most foods. Hence, you had to drill, and luckily, all that brackish water in West Texas actually led to the oil boom because of all that inland salt. Today, infrastructure is so good we don't have to drill inland wells anymore for salt and tap into ancient sea that's, trapped in the rocks. That's crazy. You're drilling from water millions of years old. Isn't that crazy? In theory, all water is millions of years old. It just gets recycled in one form or another, right? I mean, that's the water cycle. So I guess it's millions of years old, no matter how you look at it. Okay, so we have a traditional Spinout, and this also includes if it's a sponsored Spinout too, where the private equity buys 49% of your shares from you for cash. This also applies here as well. And then we have the MMTLP timeline. So I've posted before, I'll try and link to it below, about the Spinout guide. It's like a 69-page report, and it talks about like the different types of spinouts, of course, the scenarios, but it also gives good timelines of things. And a traditional timeline for a spinout is really 6 to 12 months from when they like think about it. If you read the guide, the spinout guide, this might be awkward where the microphone is and like trying to get this in. So a traditional spinout, once it's elected and the company elects to spin out. Now, Oilco and MMTLP is a bit different because it was never really supposed to be incorporated into Meta to begin with. A traditional spinout is the company's been around for a while, and then they have to spin out into different entities for one reason or another. It maybe what they're doing now doesn't like quite fit in what the company's doing, so there's a spin out. Usually spin outs, of course, will mitigate risk and liability. Think of Exxon Valdez, how they spun out after that big oil spill. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. I certainly did. So on a traditional spin out, the company will get together, they'll vote, and then they'll announce. And it's at this time, too, that they'll start assembling a management team and an IR team, an investor relations team for the spin out, usually. This is key here because these are clues. You'll know the management team. And it's around this time, too, the company will file an 8K, its first 8K, letting the investors know there's a spin out. An 8K means a form for the SEC that says, hey, this company's going to do something investors should know. So it's a public form that a company will file, if it's a publicly traded company, that lets investors know of its intentions to either acquire a company. Management changes are also listed on an 8K. If people leave, come and go. Different things happen for an 8K, but it's basically like, oh, this is important, investors should know this, we have to file an 8K. Alright? You might see 2 8Ks. There'll also be a Form 10 after that sometime. A Form 10, a traditional spin-out, publicly traded company, that just means like they're applying for this to also be a traded company as well. Form 10, get your ticker symbol, we want it traded. You have a Form 10. And then right before it trades, this is dependent on the situation of the spin out too. It could be like the morning of, or it could be a week before, a month before. You will see a 1012B. I'll cite BBig, Vinco Ventures, but they're tied. There's lots of 1012Bs. There's amendments to 1012Bs relating to that. Very easy to track that. And you can search for Form 10 on the SEC. You can search for 1012B. You can even search for 8Ks on metamaterial. There's nothing. That brings us to our MMTLP timeline. Oil, New Hudspeth, filed permits to drill in September. They were approved in September and October, and then they began drilling. The company then proceeded to update people on the drilling, say that they'd be done by the end of the year. And of course they were by December 13th. They said in the January 14th press release that drilling had been complete. It was in December that Oilco was announced. Oilco had been filed August 31st of 2021. It was first announced publicly on December 3rd, 2021. So there's quite a bit of latency there. And it's under Oilco, a generic Spinco name. The company it's going to become with is largely unknown. Usually you'd know a management team about a month after that. There's an unknown management team still. Yeah, NextBridge, and the website got leaked around the same time. But other than that, there's been no communication from the company. Usually by now you know the team. And they'll then have a dedicated IR for this spin out. MMTLP and metamaterials get Ask the Mark. That's all we get is Ask Mark. Who doesn't want to deal with this? Mark will give you varied results if you call him or email him. People ask me about what Mark says. I have given up on Mark quite a bit ago, just because I never got a response from him. So rather than, make him more upset because he does not like these questions, and his response to a lot of people is, you'll know about it when we release it. As a result, I just stay away from that. I equate it to walking on eggshells, and I can go about and speculate my own way. And if they don't want speculation, maybe they should have considered a team. That's my critique. But there's no IR team. There's just Ask the Mark. You figure that they need an IR team for this. Most times you do, but and we haven't even seen any forms yet. I know I have Form 8K, but we haven't seen any forms yet. Okay. So if you're going to go to the, oh no, it's going to become a publicly traded company, that's going to be our dividend as a stock and a new Torchlight 2, you would still see all of these, and at least one 8K, maybe two if it goes into Oilco, and then it becomes something else. Form 10, Form 10 12B, none of that. We haven't even gotten that. We don't even know who the team is, none of that. It can't be completed by March because we're not even at this step yet. So for it to say to be completed by March, if it's going to be its own publicly traded company, it's kind of misleading because there's no way it can be completed in this short of a timeline. That leaves us with two possible scenarios. One would be that a bigger oil company comes in and purchases the Oro Grande asset for stock in that company. That's the quickest way to transfer funds. Number two would be if it becomes a private company and it just buys out your shares. Those are the two options that we have at this point in time. If it does try to be its own spinout into its own publicly traded company, to be completed by March is an understatement at this time. And then if it were to do the spinout, if the first 8K was filed in March, you're looking at minimum September, probably December 2021 when things really finish. That's a long time. I think people would give up by then. So our clues left would initiate a buyout. Now, before you say, oh no, see, it's going to be delayed, bird lady. Well, let's talk about the secrecy and the lack of forms, the lack of the unknown team. So there's been a lot of secrecy. Secrecy of we got an update saying that the drilling clause was met. But there's been no other update why they're drilling more. They recompleted 2 wells. And now in the 1 well, they're going directional, which is horizontal. Which is more than what the drilling clause contingency stated. So why are they doing this, right? It means that somebody is taking control of the asset. Now, we know from historical sales, examining sales, Shell deal, the Colgate deal. Not the current Colgate deal where they're thinking about selling the entire company for $5 billion. No. But the Colgate deal where, they acquired somebody else's land. The Colgate deal, Northern Oil and Gas. All of those, the company buying it usually acquires the assets and takes control of the assets for some time. And then sometime could be a month. It could be 6 months. And then they go into a sale. And it's at this point you will tell me, but the permits for drilling are still under Hudspeth. The operating permits were still under the other companies too when the buying company took control of the assets. If it was as easy as that, to see where the permits changed. You would have known that for the Shell. You would have known that for quite a few companies. But there wasn't. There's also the case that the management company becomes a new subsidiary of the buying company. And I'll cite Concho and ConocoPhillips. ConocoPhillips had acquired Concho. Late 2020 is when they acquired Concho. All stock deal. They bought out. They said, hey, Concho shareholders, we're buying it. We're trading you for ConocoPhillips stock, COP. You know, $9.5 billion worth. Here you go. It was great. And now Concho is a subsidiary of ConocoPhillips, and they exclusively operate the Shell asset for Conoco. But it's Conoco company. This is what I hypothesized with NextBridge, is that NextBridge is going to be the operating subsidiary of the new company. It's going to convey. This management team will convey with the sale. It's also why it's permanent. It's also why it's hush-hush. If it was a traditional spin-out, you would have known a lot more. But it seems like everything's hush-hush because you're on another company's time here. That's why it's so hush-hush. If there wasn't any indication of people buying it, it wouldn't be so hush-hush. It'd be a lot more transparent. But the fact is, we don't know. We'll announce it when we know from IR. Why don't you know? It's your own company. No, maybe it's not their own company. That's why they don't know. Two things could happen at this point. You know, the bear case would be, it gets delayed in perpetuity because of this timeline. The bull case is, no, somebody else has acquired it because of the lack of transparency and the lack of the SEC filings. As Crackers the Parrot was able to point out, the lack of the SEC filings, you know, where are they? We should see a bunch of SEC filings by now. Even if you started the timeline from December 3rd when Oilco was announced, you should, 1, see an 8K by now, and 2, know who the management team is. We have not received any of those. It's been well over 2 months at this point since that update. And that wasn't even an official filing. That was just an update. Usually you would see an 8K. Where's the 8K? I think we're on somebody else's time. That's my hypothesis, because nothing's really matching with an actual timeline. And why doesn't anybody from IR know what's going on in their own company? Because maybe you're on a different company's schedule at this point and you have to sign NDAs with different companies. Oil is very NDA-ish. Lots of people are under NDAs. Even if you're considering buying the company and you don't get that bid, you still have an NDA you have to be a part of. People were still speculating Devon was a contingency for that Shell Conoco asset when they weren't. When Conoco had control long before the fact, people were still speculating about Devon. Again, it's these sort of clues which have led me to believe that this has been, you know, a sale of some kind. Now, you know, I did hypothesize that there is room for a sponsored spinout, or they get half their shares. That could be the case. If that is the case still, we would get half the money up front, and then, you know, by December, that's when the new company should finish forming and get traded. That's when you get your shares or cash part 2 for it to be acquired by somebody else. That would be a while at this point because of the lack of filings. But they said in January, well, that it was going to be, we hope to be completed by March. So for that spin out to be completed, the clock's ticking here. The fastest point to transfer wealth would be a sale for stock in the buying company. That would be the fastest way to transfer. It moves a lot easier than cash does through accounts at that point, that large of a quantity for cash. And let's end the note by saying that, the lease was completed in December 13th. So the price of oil at that point going forward is what I would base the price of the dividend to be worth using the formula, because it couldn't have been completed, it couldn't have been for sale or anything inked before then, because the lease contingency hadn't been met. But another company could have taken control of the asset. That's fine. But sale-wise, nothing really could have happened before the 13th. And I have some numbers running here. And if you take into account Christmas and then after Christmas, if you base it at $86 a barrel and you run the math, if it's a pure, you're looking at a $16 billion sale price of the whole asset, minus Torch's cut. We get a $10 billion cut from that. If you do the holdback dividend, of course, for the underwriter, miscellaneous fees, divide that by 165 million. That leaves us with like a $59 divvy. But if you take out tax, that's like a $47 divvy. So that's pretty good. That's based on $86 a barrel. I'm going to stick with 29 to 46 to be conservative still. A lot of people, seem to think that's a pipe dream number. I don't. I see the math here. I've done a lot of case studies evaluating, if you were to evaluate the reserves that Colgate has, that $5 billion sale is a very good price for Colgate. That's like Colgate's getting good sale price on their assets. Now they have quite a few more, more infrastructure that conveys with that. But if you account for that, even, they only have about 100,000 acres, but they're producing pretty good. They produce a lot of gas, too. So if you look on them, it'll say BOE for gas. I'm basing this on the 3.2 billion BBL. There could be more with gas accounted for. I'm just going to go with the BBL for now, which is barrels of oil. But, I mean, if Colgate is mostly gas, they're getting a great price. They're getting a very good sale price for Colgate. If indeed that does go through and they wind up selling their business for $5 billion. Of course, we have 134,000 acres. You can't really translate that into per acreage value because it's a per volumetric oil is what I base off of it, and not so much a volumetric in terms of land area. Land you can get anywhere. Oil, that's what you're buying, essentially. So the amount of land you have is kind of negligible at that point. That's my logical reasoning for this. Again, I'm not pulling stuff out of the air, and saying, well, it's this. I look at the clues. I look at what we should be on if it were to happen with the traditional spinout. But the fact that it kind of stopped right at the top there, and it hasn't gone this way at all, tells me that we're on another company's time. All right, guys, I will catch you soon. Goodbye.